When I reflect on my life, there are like 3 to 5 moments where I could look back and be like, yeah, my entire perspective changed right then and there. And I'm telling you right now, if I never got the chance to see The Dark Knight when I was 12 years old at an IMAX that my dad drove me to, which was over an hour away, I probably wouldn't have a YouTube channel talking about movies. I probably wouldn't have a desire to make movies. I might not even be watching as many movies if I never saw The Dark Knight. It truly changed the entire trajectory of my life. And clearly, I'm a pretty big Christopher Nolan fan. I'm a borderline fanboy. I know that's the most basic film bro kind of pick for like favorite director. Everyone's like, really? You like Christopher Nolan movies? It's like, yeah, man, I get pretty stoked when the best working filmmaker is making a new movie. Sorry. Even though I'm not guaranteed to love a Christopher Nolan movie, I still just get so excited because for me personally, he's made a bunch of 5 out of 5 movies, and I'm not somebody that gives a lot of movies a 5 out of 5. Like, I truly just love pretty much all of his work. There's a few I love a lot more than others. And even though I'm such a big fan of him, it's not like I went into the Odyssey being like, man, this is going to be a 5 out of 5. I truly have no idea until I actually watch the movie, unlike a bunch of other people who just give it a 5 before they even walk in. And this is going to be an Odyssey movie review, but I want to go a bit different in terms of my approach here. I want to go a bit more just off the rip of what I liked and didn't like about it. And I want to emphasize, it's not just for this movie, but it's for pretty much every movie. I think it was Martin Scorsese that said you really can't review something until you see it twice, because the first time you're really just taking it in, and the second time you're able to dissect it. And there's some movies where you could kind of do both on one viewing. I don't think you need to see Morbius twice, but there are just some films, especially ones from my favorite filmmakers, that I like to see at least 2 times before I make my definitive opinion about it. And Christopher Nolan is that guy for me. Like, I feel like I can't properly talk about Nolan movies rationally without seeing them twice. Like, the first time I saw Tenet, for the experience in that theater, I had a great time, and then I rewatched it at home with subtitles where I thought I would enjoy it more because I kind of know a bit more about the story. And even though I understood it more, I just liked it a little bit less. But on the flip side of that, the first time I saw Oppenheimer, I really liked it. I thought it was really good. And then I went back and saw it the next day, and I loved it. Like, there were just so many things in Oppenheimer that felt a bit overwhelming on a first watch that I think when you watch it a second or third time, there's so many little things in the background that you didn't recognize that you're like, oh my God, that is a genius choice to put this person in this situation right here at this part of the timeline. Another movie that fits that bill for me is Dunkirk. I really liked Dunkirk the first time I saw it, but the second and third time of watching Dunkirk, it is significantly better once you see how all those timelines start to like compress on each other, and there's things and characters you didn't probably pick up on the first viewing. And I'm saying all this because I think there's a good chance this happens again with the Odyssey. Now, I could go see this a second time in theaters and feel the exact same way as my first viewing, but that's why I think it'd be more fun to just talk about my first impressions of a movie that is arguably the biggest of the entire year. It feels like we don't get movies like this anymore. I know that's been a selling point for a lot of people, but just watching the trailers before this, besides Dune Part 3, which I didn't even watch because, like the Odyssey, I don't like to watch footage of movies I know I'm going to be there day one for and I'm excited for. So I closed my eyes, but even just listening to the Dune Part 3 trailer, you could hear like, oh, there are people trying to make something good here. And then every other trailer was something like Street Fighter. It's like, who the hell is coming to see the Odyssey and watching the Street Fighter trailer and be like, man, I can't wait to see that. So when movies like this come out, I want to celebrate them, I want to talk about them, but I also want to acknowledge that I don't think the Odyssey is like this groundbreaking, greatest thing that has ever come out kind of movie. I feel like a lot of the early impressions were kind of implying that. A lot of people are already saying this is the best of the decade. I don't want to go that far. I saw it in an IMAX. It wasn't one of these 70mm screenings because the closest one I have is like 3.5 hours away. And I've made the drive for that before, but for like an opening day kind of thing, I don't want to be tired and making that kind of trek. You know, I want to enjoy my experience. So I saw a regular digital IMAX that has a pretty big screen that was close by. The sound speaker was turned up so much it felt like it was peaking at certain points. So in my scenario, I gave it the best environment for a first viewing. So when the movie starts, in the first like 30 or so minutes, I was definitely enjoying it, but there were certain things I was picking up on of like, I don't like this choice, I don't like that choice, this feels weird. There just felt something off about it that wasn't fully clicking for me. And then for an hour after that, it is some of the most epic stuff I've seen in the theater in a very long time. And then for like 30 or 40 minutes, it's still really good, but it kind of feels like it's slogging on a little bit. And then the last 45 minutes are not as epic as that early part of the film that blew me away, but it's just so riveting and exciting the entire time that it feels like such a significant payoff to the entire experience that you had. So by the time it wraps up, you're like, man, this is one of the best movies movies of the year. But for me personally, I was sitting there and I was talking to my friend Adam about it, and we're like, yeah, there's like 7 or 8 more Nolan movies I like more than this one. But I think that comes with being Christopher Nolan. If one of your movies is not as good as a lot of your other ones, you're still making one of the defining films of the entire year, if not the decade. And as the rain comes down outside, I'm just gonna let you know, I'm gonna get into some spoilers here. I feel like a lot of people that are watching the Odyssey are seeing it in the first 2 days, so I don't want to dance around certain spoilers. There's a good chance you've seen the movie already. And like I said, this is more of a raw reaction. I want the freedom to be able to talk about what I want to talk about. So if you don't want to get spoiled or anything, come back to the video later. Hope you love the movie. But one thing I like about the Odyssey is there are a lot of different Christopher Nolan movies that you could feel their presence in here. There's definitely elements of Batman Begins in terms of both the fighting and like that return home kind of story. It has like a superhero element to it. Then you have like the thematic similarities with stuff like Inception and Interstellar, where it's all about a dad trying to get home to his kids. Like that's something Nolan has touched on in a lot of his movies. But I think the film it reminds me the most of is Dunkirk, which I have grown to love a lot more than I did the first viewing, like I said. And what was really great about Dunkirk was it's a pretty short movie in terms of Christopher Nolan standards. I think it's like an hour 45 or something like that. And that thing, from the moment it starts, is just like a non-stop, like holding your breath kind of movie. It is filled with tension in every single second. And I feel like when the Odyssey is at its best, it is honing in on that kind of Christopher Nolanism. There are so many moments here where you just can't believe what you're watching. I know everyone's already mentioned it. I'm not going to say the word epic like 30 times in this video like everyone else, but there is a movie magic to it when you're watching this Cyclops, which is a huge ass puppet, enter the room, where you can't help but feel like, man, it is so cool that there are people working on this scale in Hollywood and they're actually trying to give you something really cool. You would think every filmmaker would feel that obligation to do that, but they don't. We just had a Moana live action movie in theaters that looks terrible and is bombing for a reason, I think. People are tired of seeing bullshit on the screen. And I don't think you need to be a pro in like CGI or practical effects to understand that when you're watching something in the Odyssey, there's just like a tangible thing there that it feels very unique, even though we all know the story of the Cyclops and we've seen a bunch of Cyclopses in movies before this. This one still feels different. The scenario feels like you've seen it before, but it's just like a really well done version of it. That tension not only applies to the big moments like with the Cyclops, but it also applies to the smaller, more horrific moments like with Samantha Morton, who plays Cersei. And I talked about this when I talked about Oppenheimer. There were certain moments in that movie where it felt like Nolan was tapping into this horror kind of filmmaking that he never really tried before. Like that moment in Oppenheimer where the bleachers, there's people going like this and he's clearly stressing out about it. That entire sequence is one of the best of the entire decade. So you know he has this urge to go into this kind of territory, but I didn't expect all this body horror kind of stuff. It was awesome. And Samantha Morton, I don't think she's like Oscar worthy. A lot of people think she should win the Academy Award. I think that's crazy. I think she's really good in the second half of her scene, let's call it. But the first half, she felt very wooden. It was the first time in the movie where I was like, this is like not as good of a performer as everyone else so far. But I don't want that to take away from the fact that she is really good. She sells the shit out of the witch portion of her role. And it got to the point where I don't think Nolan would ever do a full-on horror movie, but if he did, I think it would be awesome. I'm also a very big fan of those last 45 minutes. Like I said, I think the Batman Begins comparisons are very valid. There's like a superhero quality to the entire thing. And there are so many things working up to that point, because it was around the time I was checking my watch and I'm like, man, I can't believe we have almost an hour to go. But from the second Matt Damon and Tom Holland meet up again, it just felt like everything was just in perfect harmony. Everyone understood the assignment. All the performers were giving their A game. Nolan, in terms of building out the story, set up everything perfectly. Ludwig's score, which we'll get to, is just like going nonstop for about 15 minutes. It feels like, I don't know what the exact time of it is, but from the moment Odysseus like reveals himself and starts killing everybody until the second that set piece ends, the music is just like this gradual buildup that just gets louder and louder. And it was a very overwhelming experience that I think works. I think by the end of the film, you feel the payoff of this entire journey. And even though I think the journey has some hiccups along the way. Like personally, in terms of the pacing, I think one thing that's so consistent about this journey, and one of the reasons this movie works as well as it does that Nolan has been good at for a while, is the casting choice. Even when Nolan hasn't had like a star-studded cast, he just always seems to know who to cast for the roles. Like he made Harry Styles work in a World War II movie. He has yet to prove me wrong that he doesn't know what he's doing in terms of that department. And honestly, when he cast Matt Damon as Odysseus, I was pretty skeptical. I like Matt Damon, but I feel like Matt Damon is one of those guys that plays the same kind of character every single time. And I'm not saying Matt Damon like steps out of his shell in this movie. I just think he fits the role really well. Like it didn't really feel like I'm watching Jason Bourne in the Odyssey. He feels like he's giving it his all. You could see throughout the movie he's doing a lot with his body. There's a part of the movie where he's absolutely jacked, where he is like in his prime. And then when you're seeing him later on in his journey, he just looks a bit more shriveled. So he clearly did a lot of work in terms of that. But I think his performance is also very solid. I think honestly, everyone in the movie is pretty much just really good. I would say the only person that absolutely blew me away was John Leguizamo. He's a guy that has a very distinct voice, a very distinct personality, but I don't think I've ever seen him be this good. He was perfectly cast, absolutely nailed the role, had probably the most emotional moments of the movie for me. He really impressed me. And everyone else I just think is really, really good. Like Tom Holland is really, really good. I've been saying for a while, I think he's a great actor. Like I do think he's a great Spider-Man, but it feels like everything he picks outside of Spider-Man just tends to not be the best role for him. But when he gets a good role, he is fantastic. He is great in this. Anne Hathaway is great. Robert Pattinson is really good. There's a lot of people that get a couple minutes of screen time that are all just really good. Jon Bernthal is playing Jon Bernthal, but I think it works. Lupita Nyong'o doesn't get that much screen time, but the few minutes she gets, she is pretty damn great. Himesh Patel is a guy that I've seen in a few things, but he hasn't really had like a super prominent role in anything, but he's also really good in this. I mean, when you look at the cast, you're like, oh yeah, that person was in it for 5 minutes and they're really good. Like Charlize Theron fits her role very well. I know Elliott Page got a ton of shit over the past year for the casting. I thought Elliott Page nailed the role. Mia Goth is in this movie. I try and go into these as blind as possible, and I don't think people realize that. I had no clue Charlize Theron and Mia Goth were both in this movie. I had zero clue. And it makes watching movies a lot more exciting, but again, I think everyone does pretty good. I think Benny Safdie, I'm mixed on. I think the look of him and the costume work for him, and when he doesn't say anything, he looks fantastic. He just looks like an iconic movie villain, but then he goes to speak in one scene, and in my head I was like, is Benny Safdie gonna do some sort of crazy voice? Like I was really excited to hear that, and then the voice comes out of him and it's just Benny Safdie, and that disappointed me a little bit, but I still think in terms of the look of the character and when his face is hidden in that mask, it looks really cool. A lot of people have already talked about the scale of this movie as well. It's getting compared to Lord of the Rings, Lawrence of Arabia, Seven Samurai, you know, you classic epic movies. And while I don't think it's as good as some of those, I still think it is worthy of the title of being something that is epic. And it's not even just the action set pieces. Like clearly, like I said, the Cyclops speaks for itself. It's phenomenal. It's going to win on all the awards in terms of visual effects. But even when you just see like the castle of Ithaca on top of the mountain, there's just like this sense of scope to every single thing. It's not just the scope of the story, it's the scope of everything in the frame. It just feels big. And the action set pieces speak for themselves. I think the entire siege of Troy is so well done. Like there are so many moments in that feel satisfying. And when I watched it a few months ago, because it played in front of Avatar 3 on the IMAX screens, I definitely liked it, but I think when you watch it in the context of the movie, it just feels so much grander. The tension is so much higher, and I think all of those action set pieces feel like Nolan at his best. And even though there are moments that feel like Nolan is at his best, I think this is still kind of far from being his best movie. And I'm going to say these things, and to be honest, a lot of them aren't that big of a deal. I just need to explain why, like, to me, something like The Dark Knight or Interstellar is kind of untouchable compared to something like this. To me, those are two movies where every frame is pretty much perfect, and like as a story, it just speaks to me a lot more. They make me more emotional, and there are a lot of things working at a much grander scale in that somehow, even though the Odyssey feels like it should be the grander movie. So let's start with the thing I'm a little bit mixed on, and that is Ludwig's score for this movie, which I do think is objectively good. I think it's really good. It's very loud in the theater, and I think it fits a lot of the sequences within the movie, especially when like soldiers are on the run or the action set pieces. It really stands out a lot. And I think the main kind of melancholy theme is pretty good, but I would be lying if I said that it matches up to a lot of the other Nolan scores. Like if you went through every movie in his filmography, cinematography. I do think this is probably the weakest score since like The Prestige. And I think even on a rewatch, I would still probably feel this way. And again, if this is your weakest score since The Prestige, it's still pretty damn good. It's probably Oscar worthy, but this is kind of the one time where I love Ludwig. I'm a huge fan of him. I think he's probably our best contemporary in terms of young composers. But this was the one time I was like, man, I do feel like Hans Zimmer would have been a better fit for the Odyssey. It's one of those things we'll never know. And I bet Nolan loves working with Ludwig just as much, but it just felt like we were one grade away. Like this is a solid A-, but all the other scores from everything, like even Dunkirk, which I don't think has the best score, is still like an A. Interstellar, the Batman movies, these are all A+. Oppenheimer's an A+, and Tenet is even an A. So to me, the Odyssey is like an A-. Still great, still fantastic, but I don't think it's going to be like as instantly as iconic as a lot of those other movies. I also think the editing is a little weird for this one. So he teams up with Jennifer Lane once again, who's been working with Nolan for a while now. She did Oppenheimer, won an Academy Award for Oppenheimer, and very deservingly so. I thought that was the best editing job I've seen possibly this decade, if I'm being honest. The way she was able to seamlessly kind of cut between those different sequences, it's not something that's easy to do, and she did it with such a distinct rhythm to it. And that's one of the reasons Oppenheimer impresses me more than the Odyssey, because if you put them like side by side, clearly the Odyssey should be the more exciting, nonstop kind of movie, but to me, Oppenheimer feels more like that. And there are some things that I don't think they're Jennifer Lane's fault. So a big thing with this movie that I should mention, that everyone has mentioned, that this is the first movie entirely shot with IMAX cameras, which have always been notoriously very loud. So I'm sure there are a lot of times where we are seeing dialogue that is being ADR'd to some extent, and there's some conversations that go on. The one that caught me off guard the most is in the first 5 minutes of the movie. That's why I was a bit thrown off, where Tom Holland and Robert Pattinson talk for the first time, and they're doing like a shot, reverse shot kind of dialogue, and it's cut so nonstop and weird. It feels like something you would watch an amateur do. And to me, the only possible explanation for that is they are covering up some sort of lip syncing issues in that specific conversation. And it happens a couple times in the movie, but to me, that was the most notable one with how many times they were going back and forth. It just felt kind of off-putting. It's one of those things, if you don't watch a ton of movies, you're probably not going to notice, or even if you watch a lot of movies, if you don't edit a lot of videos, you probably wouldn't notice it. And it's such a nitpick. Like I don't want to be the loser in the corner being like, technically the shot reverse shot editing in the Odyssey isn't that good, guys. Like I understand how I'm coming across here, but it is one of those things where for me, it breaks my immersion just a little bit. And they do one thing here, which I hate when any filmmaker does, even if it's Christopher Nolan, I got to call it out, where a conversation will be happening and they're talking about a character with a very specific name and you're thinking, who the hell is that? And instead of letting the audience figure it out through the rest of the dialogue or a rewatch and being like, oh, this is who we're talking about, they instead insert a 1-second clip of the character. Like there's times where we are talking about Elliott Page's character and they'll show like a 1-second flash of them for a second. And I'm like, really? We have to keep explaining who this character is, especially after it was explained so many times what the little thing was that they picked out of the lottery system. When Matt Damon's like explaining that at the end to Robert Pattinson's character and he's like putting it in his mouth and you see a 1-second flash of Elliott Page again, it's like, yes, we understand who this is about. We don't have to be reminded about this scenario for the 4th, 5th, 6th time in this movie. In terms of other nitpicks, I know people have always hated on the Nolan Batman movies for the fight choreography, which is fine. I understand. It's a little bit clunky, and I do think it is pretty clunky in some parts of this movie. I think most of the choreography is really, really good, especially in terms of the big scale action stuff. But in the final scene with Odysseus in the room full of suitors, Matt Damon does a pretty good job most of the time, but there were a few choices where I was like, that doesn't look great. Like when he takes the axes and he's like swinging them around, it just looks so slow. I'm like, who is actually going to get hit by this thing? And when it comes to my last nitpick with this movie, I do think the pacing of it suffers a little bit, which is kind of out of the ordinary for Nolan. I think he's always been good with it. Like The Dark Knight is an almost 3-hour movie that feels like 2 hours. Oppenheimer is a 3-hour biopic that feels like 2.5. That is something that is really hard to pull off. And I think the Odyssey is like just under 3 hours. To me, it felt like a 3-hour, 15-minute or 3.5-hour movie. My friends that saw it with me did not agree. They thought it felt shorter. So maybe on a second watch, I won't feel that way. But it just feels like there's some parts of this movie that feel slower than than others. And I don't mind a slow movie at all. I just feel like there were times where it wasn't matching the pace that it should have. But it's weird because at the same time, my friend Jake made a good point that I agree with, where it feels like there should be 30 more minutes to this movie. And I know the Odyssey is like such a big story to tackle. I've never read it myself. I've only spark notes it in high school. So I understand there's a lot more that could be told, but I also understand you can't make a 5-hour movie. So there are things that have to be cut. There are things that have to be shown no matter what. And I do feel like some of these scenes feel like they could have been fleshed out a little bit more. Like there should be a director's cut that is 3 hours and 15 minutes or 3.5 hours. And I do really like this movie a lot. I'm going to try and check it out in theaters at least one more time. Is it my favorite movie of the year right now? Probably not. If you watch my top 10 movies of 2026 so far that I posted yesterday, please check it out. There are a lot of small movies in there that I think deserve attention. But I would probably put The Odyssey as my third favorite movie of the year so far, behind my top two choices. So if anything, that should incentivize you to check out my top two movies of the year. In terms of where I rank it among other movies, I've already done a Christopher Nolan ranking video on my channel if you want to watch that. I think most of my picks on there stand up. But for me, like The Dark Knight and Interstellar are currently my two favorites. I don't think this comes close to that. I could see why someone would argue it's better than Inception. I have a strong feeling towards Inception. I love that movie. Again, like The Dark Knight, one of the reasons I'm on a YouTube channel. So I pick Inception over it. I pick Oppenheimer over it. I pick The Prestige over it. I pick Memento over it. I'm a huge Batman Begins guy, so I'd probably also put Batman Begins over it, but I think it's right in like the Dunkirk range. I think Dunkirk is a great movie. For a lot of people, that's Christopher Nolan's best movie. And if you're in that camp, like I understand where you're coming from. Nolan is definitely in like this different phase of his career. I feel like Batman Begins through Interstellar feels like a specific phase of Christopher Nolan's filmography. Everything before Batman Begins feels like a specific phase. And then everything from Dunkirk until The Odyssey feels like a very specific phase of Nolan. And if The Odyssey is not the final film of that phase, it's probably the start of some sort of new phase for Nolan. But I do think it's objectively a pretty great movie. I think it's an 8 out of 10. I think it is a true achievement in terms of pure filmmaking. I don't think it's a perfect movie. I think there are definitely flaws within it, whether that be the limitations of filming all on IMAX when it comes to like cutting those specific conversation pieces together. But I also don't think we have seen anything like this year. I think the only thing that's going to come close to it in terms of scale is probably Dune Part 3. We'll see once that comes out. And like I said, the reason I wanted to bang out this video right now is because I wanted to talk about my first impression, because with Nolan, my taste always changes. There's some movies I end up liking at first and then not liking as much as others. And then there's others that just get better as time goes on. Interstellar is a clear example of that for me. So let me know down below, what did you think of The Odyssey? What is your favorite Christopher Nolan movie? You can rank them all. You can give me your top 5. What is the most underrated one in your opinion? Like I said, I just posted my top 10 movies of the year so far, and spoiler alert, this would be number 3. So go check out that video if you want some other movie recommendations from me. If this is your first time on the channel, if you think we could sit in a dive bar and talk movies for 3 hours, this is the right YouTube channel for you. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. And this is Chase. Thank you so much for watching as always, and I hope you have an awesome day. Thanks.